When you set up your Microsoft Entra ID environment, one of the first things you'll come across is the tenant name. This name isn't just cosmetic. It defines how your users sign in, how your services are addressed, and how your organization is identified across Microsoft's cloud. Let's walk through what this tenant name is, what it looks like by default, and how you can customize it to better reflect your organization. Your Entra ID tenant is your dedicated, isolated directory within Microsoft's cloud. It holds your users, groups, applications, devices, and policies. Think of it as your organization's digital control center. When you create a tenant, whether through Microsoft 365, Azure, or another Microsoft service, Microsoft assigns it a default name and domain. When you first create your Microsoft Entra ID tenant, you're asked to choose a name. Based on that, Microsoft assigns you a default domain that ends in onmicrosoft.com. For example, if you chose your company during setup, your default domain becomes yourcompany.onmicrosoft.com. This domain acts as your initial primary domain, and it plays a key role in several areas. First, it's used for user principal names, UPNs. So when you create a new user, their sign-in name will look like userwirecompany.onmicrosoft.com, unless you add a custom domain later. Second, it's tied to your email addresses. If you haven't added your own company domain yet, users will be assigned email addresses under the onmicrosoft.com domain. And finally, this domain also shows up in application URLs and redirect URIs for apps registered in Entra ID. It becomes part of how your apps communicate and authenticate. Here's the important part. You can't change or remove this default onmicrosoft.com domain. Even if you add your own custom domain later, this original domain stays in your tenant as a fallback. It's your foundational identity within Microsoft's cloud. While you can't change the default onmicrosoft.com domain, you do have several options to make your tenant reflect your brand more accurately. First, you can add a custom domain like yourcompany.com. This allows your users to sign in with familiar email addresses and aligns your cloud presence with your organization's real-world identity. Next, you can set a display name for your directory. This is the friendly name that appears in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. You can update it anytime to reflect your branding or organizational changes. Here's what you typically customize. The directory name is what you'll see in the Entra portal and across Microsoft services. It's purely visual and easy to update. The custom domain, for example, yourorg.com, must be verified using DNS records. Once verified, it becomes usable across sign-ins, apps, and email. You can also define your primary email domain so that users log in with addresses like user@yourorg.com instead of the default, onmicrosoft.com. Doing this not only makes the login experience smoother and more professional for your users, it also strengthens trust, simplifies administration, and ensures that your tenant feels like a natural extension of your organization's identity. When your users see an unfamiliar domain like onmicrosoft.com, it can feel confusing or even unprofessional. That's why customizing your tenant name is more than just a branding tweak. It's a smart identity strategy. By adding your own domain, you build trust with your users. They're more likely to feel confident logging in when they recognize the domain as part of your official organization. It also simplifies the sign-in experience. Instead of typing user@yourcompany.onmicrosoft.com, users can log in with familiar, branded email addresses like user@yourcompany.com. Even more importantly, it aligns your branding across Microsoft services. Whether you're sending invites, assigning licenses, or launching apps, your custom domain becomes part of every user-facing experience. And when you deploy services like Microsoft Teams, Exchange Online, or SharePoint, That domain becomes crucial for email routing, file sharing, and collaboration. Without it, things can feel disjointed. With it, everything flows naturally and professionally. So, what's your key takeaway? Your Entra ID tenant starts with a default onmicrosoft.com domain. This default name can't be changed or removed. You can add custom domains and set a custom directory name for branding and usability. A properly branded tenant improves user trust, login clarity, and professional appearance.